Welcome to Backstory with Joan Goldstein. I'm Joan Goldstein. My guest today is an amazing woman named Cheyenne Wolf. And what makes her amazing is she is the director and has been for quite some time of a wonderful community-based program connecting lives with literature. And it's called People and Stories, and also has a Spanish name, Gente y Cuentos. And this is a program that has been in existence for 50 years, and they're celebrating their 50th anniversary this weekend. Now, Cheyenne, tell us what is People and Stories? What is the goal? Who do you try to help, and how do they help?
Well, thank you so much, Joan, for having me. Again, it's such a pleasure to be here. People and Stories, Gente y Cuentos, is a literature reading and discussion program, like you mentioned, offered in English and in Spanish. And again, like you said, it's our 50th year of programming. So we began in 1972 with short story reading. It's read aloud. Our founder developed a methodology to bring short stories sort of from where they're typically relegated to in the college classroom and out into the community with folks who either aren't reading or haven't had many opportunities to read, or maybe even aren't interested. We sort of create these learning circles and environments in really some marginalized audiences, as well as community centers. So we do work with people who are not engaging regularly with their cultural heritage and really our literature that we all share.
Yes, and the way they do it is they hand out copies of short stories by really marvelous writers. I'll give you a few of their names and you know who I'm talking about. And then the leader reads it aloud as everyone follows it along. And then there is a discussion about what it is that the story tells them, that they can connect with their lives. So they have such writers. They have Ernest Hemingway, they have Louise Erdrich, they have Langston Hughes, Bernard Malamud, Grace Paley. They have well-known and brilliant short story and fiction writers. So this is really connecting literature with life, isn't it?
That is just exactly the perfect way to say it, Joan. I think that for me, I was privileged enough to have learned to read growing up and to have read, throughout my educational career. But as we know, there's millions of people in this country that were not so privileged and did not have access to literature. And so, like you said, I mean, Louise Erdrich, Chinua Achebe, we have hundreds of stories on our bibliography that we use to really stimulate a dialogue between people that may or may not have interacted with one another, with even diverse, thought leaders, diverse communities. And so we use literature as that springboard for really dynamic conversation.
In fact, your group comes to a place where I live, and I participate and enjoy it immensely. I was with them last year, and they do a whole series, and I'm doing a new series with them with Pat Smith, and who's doing a beautiful job. That's the leader. And so tell us, how did it begin? You say 50, you're celebrating 50 years. You weren't doing it 50 years ago, I assume. So who started this and what was their goal?
Yeah, I love that question. You're right. I've not been doing this for 50 years. I've been here for 8, and in that time, just the amount that I've loved the origin story throughout. And I guess I'll give you the short version. But our founder is a remarkable woman named Sarah Hirschman. She is lived in Princeton. Many people know her locally around here. But growing up, she actually didn't originate here in the States. She was born in Lithuania to Russian Jewish parents. And I think it was just before the World War II that she and her family had relocated to the States. So she, already had such a multiple languages learned there over in Europe. When she came here, she met her husband named Albert Hirschman. I'm obviously skipping ahead a couple steps, But really what that relationship did is they traveled around the world. He was a world known, economist. And so they traveled, I wrote down a couple different places here: South America, India, Thailand, Africa. And so when you think about really a citizen of the world, she comes to mind, knowing her origin story. And she just fell in love with the literature in Latin America. It's how she learned how to speak Spanish. And then she met people that she was quite fond of, that she really wanted to get to know, and could not believe that they hadn't had access to the literature that she loved so much, because she sees them living the cultural life that she sees reflected in the stories, and wanted to create a way to make that literature that she loved accessible to them. And as well as she really was deeply interested in getting to know them. I think she said something along the lines of, I wanted to get to know people that I hadn't ever had the chance to know, or wanted to connect with people. So that was her motivation. She loved the literature. She wanted to share it. She herself was Ivy League and well-educated. And a lot of her colleagues didn't believe that the people that she wanted to serve, people in, impoverished, really illiterate, undereducated audiences, everyone said they're not going to be capable of believing this, or I'm sorry, of understanding and discussing and really, and what we see time and again is that the conversation is, as you know, Joan, very much educational, very much equivalent to, you might say, a college classroom, because the life experience piece is, you bring that with you. So that's how you understand the story. And the discussion is really just so much fun. I mentioned I learned to read. I was privileged to be read to growing up, but I didn't love it. I did it when I had to. I did it sort of leisurely here and there, but really this program made me love stories and love fiction. I found the value in it. So that's, for me, why I love it so much. But there's so much to love. So maybe I'll just leave it there.
Yes, it is. And our program comes every Monday, and I look forward to Mondays now the way I usually don't. It's usually it's Monday. Oh God, back to this or back to that. No, Mondays we're going to stories and people.
Maybe we need more Monday programs. That
Yes,
sounds like a recipe.
Monday is a jolly day. And there are people who come to the building where I live who don't live here. So they're coming from the outside, and I've made friendships with some of the people who come there, and we talk to each other and we appreciate each other when someone makes a comment or an idea. And also, of course, short stories had a special meaning. I attended as an undergraduate the State University of Iowa, where I was in the famed writer's workshop, and I learned to write short stories myself. And so some of my stories were read there. And so I have a great love of short stories. And the thing about short stories are that people use them to give you snapshots of people's lives. And so those snapshots help us to try, as you put it, to understand other people. How do we understand each other? We're all different, but yet we're all humans. So how do we understand each other? And these stories help us. Put yourself in the shoes of someone else. And that is the word we call empathy, isn't it? And this is what this program supports so nicely, so beautifully.
Thank you, Joan, for saying that. I agree. I mean, good stories are just so universal, because the themes in them, they connect to the sort of the ups and downs, or they depict the ups and downs of really the human condition. I mean, through these stories, our groups grapple with things like loss, abandonment, grief. I mean, any addiction, trauma, any number of really deep issues that I think are incredibly difficult to talk about, to say the least, with other people, let alone with people that you aren't really comfortable with. And maybe if you're not yourself very comfortable with some of the things that come up, it's a nice distance. And I've found time and again for myself, but also, throughout our groups, that the stories bring things up for you that are not, you don't know that they are really needing to maybe be thought about some more, you know? And so when they kind of stick around, that to me is a helpful way to sort of process and deal with your emotions and make meaning of your experiences when you can get the chance to reflect on those things.
And of course, one of the things that evolves from it is empathy. And what is empathy? Why is it something that we value?
Yeah, wow, that's such a deep question. I think really it's at the heart of connection, and I think connection is, to me, what we value, because you know, anything that happens in our lives, anything that experiences good or bad, we want another human being usually to share that with, and in some way, or at least be with, you know, in that experience. So you know, sometimes this is a lonely world, and so when you can find someone who you can relate to, whether it's a character in the story or whether it's a person across the room from you, I think that's really powerful in and of itself. But certainly I think collectively right now we need a whole lot more of empathy. You know, we really just need to be able to sit our identities aside and then imagine what it's like to be somebody else. And that's what we get to do in stories. So that's why I think it's so special.
Yes, and also at this time, in this time in our life, in our world, we're especially young people, but not only young people, older people too, experience isolation and loneliness. So the need for connection is even greater than before, because we humans need humans.
Yeah.
And that isolation and that loneliness is, you know, when I'm teaching college sociology, which I still do, this is one of the things we focus on. How do we connect? Why do we need connections? What does it do for us? How can we make it happen?
I I love that. And I would just say that I think for me, the reason I don't know, I guess my answer is I don't know the answer to that question, although it's one I think about often. One thing I do believe is that when we can find a method or find a program or find a way that we can arrive at that place without necessarily saying, hey, we're going to deal with our conflict, and hey, we're going to deal with our, you know, our lack of emotion, or really, you know, it's just the fact that we can find a way that deals with that doesn't feel as direct, as threatening, as, I mean, it's not therapy, it's very much a literature discussion. But as you know, I mean, the discussion dances between the literature and the life experience. So you get to bring that in a way that I think is so important, and really jumpstarts a process of work towards change in a lot of ways, because everybody individually is having an opportunity to see one another differently. And over the course of the 8 weeks, you know, magical things happen where your relationships are really, we've heard from many site staff. We have about 25 to 30 organizational partners in our area in the tri-state, as well as some in California. But we, time and again, I think what strikes me the most about some of the site staff testimonials that we get is that participants are better able, the site staff observes that the participants are better able and more inclined to engage in other areas. So if we're working with the social services, you know, workforce development program, for example, we'll often hear that the participants in that program are more engaged and more participating at greater levels than they were prior. So I think it is that kickstart of, we can see each other in a different way, maybe a more fuller way. Maybe we're not best friends, but it's humanizing. So that's really what I think we need right now.
And how does it help? You do programs in prisons, don't you?
Yes.
How does that work? How do you help people in prisons?
Yeah. So, well, the program itself is the same across all of our audiences. So it's an 8-week, once a week program series, but which is our classic model. But in prison specifically, I mean, what I reflect on a lot is we have a question on our evaluation that says, what meant the most to you about participating in this program? And there are different trends for different audiences, but I think the one thing that really sticks out for me for the prison groups is it's so often said that what means the most is just people showing up for them, not judging them. We don't ask why you're here or what offense you had, there's nothing like that. And so it's really just face value. You show up, you don't have to read, you don't have to do any prerequisites, but we just show up for you and we ask you what you think. That's another common thing, is that nobody's ever asked me what I thought about such deep topics like this. And it's just a basic human kindness, I think, that they appreciate. And in addition, some things, one testimonial, I never knew I loved to read, came out of a young man serving some time. Another one, people in stories taught me how to think, not what to think, which I think is just core to why it works. People that weren't successful in school for whatever reason find that they are very capable of understanding literature, very capable of speaking to these issues. And so it's empowering more than anything, I think.
Oh, that's a wonderful word, isn't it? Empowering. No wonder people like it, huh? Yes.
It sure is.
So you're having a celebration this weekend, aren't you, at the Barnes and Noble bookstore?
Yes, we are. Well, this whole year, really, and really the fall, we've been having a lot of celebratory events. I'm not sure when our show will air, but there will certainly be more on our website. Maybe I'll just use a moment to put that in there. peopleandstories.org. We've been having many celebratory events, really all free for the public, and just sharing our method, sharing our mission. Anywhere we can do a sample session, we call them try-its. We try to, we have limited resources as do so many others doing good charity work, but it's been really fun to remember our founder and her generosity and her spirit, and try and do that as much as we can this fall in her memory and in celebration. So
Okay, that's wonderful. And what about the future? Do you have any thoughts, ideas, some things that you want to take off on? Give us a hint.
Yeah, I have many ideas, and I'm trying to think if I can synthesize the sort of overall strategic plan that we have. But I think what we've found in our 50 years is that the method that Sarah Hirschman developed is so universally applicable. It sort of works. We get good impact numbers and good outcomes everywhere, and obviously we can't serve everyone. So we've always prioritized really audiences who need it, who could benefit from it most, of course. But I think we want to be more perhaps intentional about partnering with some. We had one program, for example, with the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, which was sort of a major initiative. And so it took a lot of time to develop, but that, programs are more continuing on through that model than some of our more direct delivery service models. So that's really we're not changing our program. We're not changing our audiences. If anything, we're just building out in a way that makes us more sustainable, I think is I've been here for 8 years. And as you know, Joan, I think a lot about, how to keep this thing going for the next 50. So that's the leading driving force behind everything that we do. And hopefully we'll succeed in doing that.
Yes, and we taped a show 6 years ago, BC, I call it, before COVID. We taped a show, this program, in 2016, and we were able to do it from a studio because at that time we could. Now we're doing it on Zoom. And I was happy to have Cheyenne come back again, and she looks exactly the same, maybe a little younger.
Same, likewise, Joan. Look, we're getting younger over here, don't we?
We're getting younger, even though I'm in a community for older adults.
Hey, I've attended a couple of those sessions with your community, and I have to say one of my favorite groups. I think, if I may, the one thing I really appreciate about your sort of cohort that you have over there is that the women, they're not, you say your piece because you trust one another enough that that is going to add to the conversation. And I think that is the trust piece, is sometimes takes a couple weeks, couple sessions to develop. But I think when that happens and when you can do that, and I think you'd agree with me, Joan, that without those people that commonly have a different opinion, without them, it's just not as full of a discussion. And that's something we see time and again. Our participants actually, they don't build tolerance. We're not sure how much they have prior, but what we see is that they are more intrigued and more, look forward to the difference of opinions, which, man, if I could say that about the state of our discourse in this country collectively, I mean, to welcome differences of opinion just for a greater collective understanding, that's it sort of reaffirms my belief in humanity when I see it happening in microcosms. So, more of that would be a good direction, I think, moving forward.
Yes, and it would support our democracy too, as well, because there are differences and people are are more divisive, I think, now than they've been, perhaps. Well, they have in the past as well, I have to say. One of the advantages or perhaps disadvantages of living as long as I have is to see so many of these changes going on. And there were times when people certainly were very divided and divisive, and other times when they were not. And we all hope for that, of course. But it does help us, because in a democracy, you can't have people so divided from each other that they can't communicate, that they can't share, and they can't understand. You see, the key word in sociology is to understand. And this is why I was so drawn to getting my doctorate in sociology, because this is what I wanted. This is what I wanted, to understand others. I wanted to help people understand each other. Because this is how we can respect each other. This is how we can help each other. This is what empathy is. These are things that we value, and anything that supports that and helps us with our empathy is going to make us a more kindly and caring society. Isn't that what we would like to have? Yes.
Yes, certainly, and inclusive. I mean, in my mind, our program is one of the most inclusive programs I've come across, in terms of, you don't need to know how to read. You don't even have to write on your evaluation form. I mean, there's very few, of course, there are some barriers, but I love to work to advance a mission that 50 years ago had that foresight, had that we want all people at the table. And I think for disempowered people who are typically maybe accustomed to their position of oppression, seeing them wake up to their power, I think is the first step to any real inclusive collective change that we want to make. So, having everyone understand that they deserve a seat at the table, I think, is the first step. And then actually providing them with that seat is the next. And hopefully we can do that from a sort of a government top down. I would love to see that, but certainly on the grassroots level, having people come together and, discover their power and really rediscover the literature that is theirs as well, that is shared for all of us, I think is really powerful first step.
Well, Cheyenne Wolf, thank you so much for the beautiful work that you do. And thank you so much for coming on board today, 6 years after we first taped our first discussion, to share with us the beautiful work that your organization does, that you do, to help us, and to come on board with Backstory with Joan Goldstein. So let's keep on going, keep on doing the beautiful work, and we'll talk some more.
Sounds like a plan.
Sounds like a plan. Goodbye.